If you've ever wondered what it would be like to see the One Piece manga equivalent of the Avengers Endgame portal scene, this might be it. Because I sure as heck don't ever remember feeling this level of enthusiasm over a group of characters yelling at each other while jumping and disembarking off of different ships. And I also feel like the hype ended up eclipsing the inhumane atrocity of people, including children and babies, being hunted for sport. So if you take away the hype of all the big names showing up to fight and clash with each other, things get really freaking dark real quick. I mean, that very first page of people in shackles running for their lives pretty much felt like a genocide scene from Attack on Titan. Meanwhile, Mr. Kong, who never does much of anything in this story aside from purchasing office supplies that he can customize, suddenly decides to make an effort to ensure the security of the celestial dragons at God Valley so that they can go on massacring innocent people in a jolly and recreational way. That's right, Kong is all about making sure that people who murder and discriminate can do so in a safe space. Also, there's a very stark contrast between the images of people who are enslaved, running for their lives, and then Garp relaxing, listening to some tunes at like a beach resort. That stated, Garp gets a pass here because he actually doesn't know what's going on in God Valley, whereas Kong, on the other hand, knows exactly what kind of stuff goes down in these tournaments, and all he's worried about is upping security for the protection of the celestial dragons. Also, apparently there seems to be a video Dendenmushi televising the atrocities of the event back to Marijoa, Hunger Games style.
Now, the most important piece of lore that we learned about this week was that Oda did not, in fact, forget about Bogard, and that he was actually in God's Valley coming in clutch for the Marines. Also, I'm pretty sure that Zoro got lost on his way to his chair, and that's why he lost to the Chihuahuas. Aside from that, there are two pretty important pieces of dialogue in this chapter that, if we combine them and add them to stuff that we already know from the story, actually make for a pretty big reveal. It's pretty obvious that Oda's still trying to hide a lot of information from the reader about what this God Valley incident was actually about, and what actually went down in this incident as well. But I think I figured something out, so I'm gonna weave my way into telling you what that is.
Oda continues to reveal new similarities between the characters of Ginny and Bonnie, like the fact that Ginny's age doesn't match her physical appearance, as she says that she's actually 4 years older than Kuma, which would make her 13. She also seems to share Bonnie's fierce appetite as well. And the designs of the two little kids that are seen throwing rocks at Kuma and then being cured by him also seem to match the designs of two of Bonnie's crew members that she used to have pre-time skip. As mentioned by Ivankov, the idea of Kuma's parents running a church actually fits his character very well, because not only can the name of Bartholomew be a reference to one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, but it could also be a reference to a Catholic bishop named Bartolomé de las Casas, who became a human rights activist for the indigenous people after realizing the error of his ways in the late 1400s. That stated, the very first depiction of Kuma as a child that Oda drew in an SPS is very clearly referencing the famous Japanese figure of Ninomiya Sontoku, who was a man that restored his household by investing in agriculture and was later recruited to rule a feudal district in Japan. At one point during his rule, the population encountered a severe shortage of food, and Sontoku became known for his efforts to help feed the poor. Imagery-wise, that moment with Kuma praying in the church is now the third time that Oda deliberately places him under a divine type of lighting, and so given that it's happened more than twice, the sunlight hitting him in that way is pretty symbolic. Also, Ivankov calling the paws the hands of liberation is interesting, because we've seen that those parts of Kuma's hands are actually kind of rubbery in nature. Another piece of symbolism is the kids feeling joy by the end of the chapter with the moon in the background there as well. And then the other thing is that there's just no way that Kuma is not going to show up in Egghead to liberate the Straw Hats from Saturn. I think the reason why we even got that scene in God Valley between Kuma and Saturn is because it's going to happen again in the present. Like, Kuma even warns Saturn in that scene that he's going to use his power to save people.
Also, just the setup of God's Valley with so many ships surrounding the island is very similar to the Egghead situation as well. Another thing that I thought was interesting was that even though Saturn is not in his Ushi Oni demon form, he still has the flames, the fire, and the lightning active around him. So again, that's a very strange and unique feature, even by rare Devil Fruit standards. Also, was Kuma able to move, even though he was that close to Saturn? Because at first, like, he's belly up, like he's on his back, right? But then you actually see him kind of get into this sort of crawling position where he's trying to stand up. So it got me to think, was Kuma actually breaking through Saturn's movement suppression technique?
Something I'm still left wondering is who this silhouetted figure that appears to be wearing a straw hat, who tells Kaido that they're going to God's Valley, actually is. is. The anime gave the character a pretty deep and scruffy voice, so I initially just assumed that it was Rock's, but we've seen what Rock's silhouette looks like, and it doesn't seem to match. And speaking of designs kind of not matching, Roger is actually not wearing his standard pirate hat, but instead is wearing the straw hat. And also, his mustache isn't really that thick. And the reason why that's interesting is because we were shown that this is how Roger looked when he found Shanks after God's Valley. So does that mean that the amount of time that Shanks spent inside of that treasure chest was actually enough for Roger to grow a full-blown mustache? It also seemed like Kaido had something pretty important to reveal about Roger, but unfortunately his dialogue gets cut off. So Oda making it pretty clear that there's still more to Kaido's backstory that has to be revealed. Now, in a bit of Amazon Lily lore, we know that the empresses there have a history of getting afflicted by a love sickness, and so if they bottle up their feelings for too long, they end up dying. And so according to Gloriosa, the only cure for them is to actually follow their feelings and leave the island to spend some time with the men that they fall for. And so that brings up the theory of Shaki leaving to be with Rayleigh, and that's how she survived the sickness. But also we now learn that it was not just Buckingham Stussy that was infatuated with Whitebeard, but Gloriosa also had feelings for Newgate as well. I wonder if that's still the same snake that she has in the flashback as the one that she uses now as a staff. I've also seen some fans make the connection that in addition to Captain John, there are other bodies of the members of the Rocks Pirates that ended up as zombies in Moria's crew. Specifically these three, the big guy with the helmet and the long beard, the apparent fishman with the oval face, could be this guy with the collar here, and then the guy with the Wolverine claws that we see jumping in the background appears to be part of the group as well. On a similar note, the appearance of one of the Gods Knights, the one that's wearing a mask, has gotten people to try and make a connection about whether or not he was one of the kids in Big Mom's flashback. Personally, I doubt it, because then Oda would have to explain why it is that he didn't get eaten by Big Mom, and he would also need to explain how it was that a random orphan ended up climbing up the ladder to become one of the Gods Knights. And this is not the first time that I've seen fans try to find some present-day relevance and connection for the kids from the Sheep's House. At one point during Whole Cake Island, people were saying that some of the kids were actually the guests of honor that Big Mom had invited to the wedding, which of course we know is not true. What is interesting though is that she did invite Stussy to the wedding, who is a literal copy of her former crewmate, and then we see Struzan as part of the Rocks Pirates lineup as well. We get a little glimpse of him right there in the lower right corner, right next to Whitebeard. I mean, we know that Struzan had been manipulating Big Mom ever since she was a child, and then there's that theory about how since Spero is Linlin's first son, and since him and Struzan have similar features, that perhaps Struzan is actually Spero's father, which is all kinds of messed up. And so just like Big Mom was influenced by Struzan, we know that Kaido was influenced by Higurashi, who is the one that kind of incites him to take over Wano, and I'm pretty sure that it was because she knew that Pluton was there. Of course, we now know that Kaido actually ends up killing Higurashi, and so I wonder if Big Mom will end up doing something similar to Struzan, given that he was one of the two people that witnessed her eating her friends, and he never said anything to her about it, and he just kept manipulating her for his own gain.
I also thought it was interesting how Big Mom was the first and only Rocks pirate to find Kaido's double fruit. It got me to think about like the powers of the Soru no Mi, and since we know that Zoans have like a will of their own, I wonder if there was something about Big Mom's double fruit of being able to sense souls or something, that she maybe sensed the fruit and that's why she was able to find it so quickly. Because I remember back in Onigashima, there's a scene where Zoro is about to cut Kaido with Enma, and Big Mom has never seen this sword, right? And she's like, Kaido, you better dodge, because that's not a normal sword. And so that made it obvious that she could sense something about Enma that wasn't normal. So I wonder if she was able to sense Kaido's double fruit in God Valley as well. I thought Ivankov was pretty unintentionally funny in this chapter, because Ginny talks about how they're going to be looking for the fish, dragon, azure model fruit like Kaido's fruit, and they're also going to be looking for the pawpaw fruit. That's the key to their escape. And so there's a scene that comes after that where they literally find the fruits, and Ivankov is like, I don't know which one is which. Gee, Ivankov, I don't know. This is just a wild guess, but maybe the fruit that looks like it has whiskers on it and has blue scales could be the one for the blue dragon, and then the one that looks like a paw is the pawpaw fruit. And so the God Valley incident ends, and Oda just writes Ivankov out of the flashback. It just felt very abrupt and coincidental that Ivankov decides to leave Kuma and Ginny like that. Like, to me, it's almost like Ivankov was saying, like, bye Ginny, bye Kuma, I'm off to find adventure, because I can tell this flashback is just a tragedy waiting to happen.
Additionally, Oda continues to highlight the dysfunctionality of Rox's crew, which we know contributed to its demise. Everybody's just kind of in it for themselves, which kind of reminds me of Blackbeard's crew, when he tells Kuzan that, him and his crew are not really friends. So it's very likely that Blackbeard's crew will end up collapsing in on itself by the end as well. And that also brings me to the main reason for why I think Xebec isn't really featured in this flashback, which is that I think Oda is saving Xebec to be a crucial part of the Blackbeard backstory, which, given Garling's presence here in God Valley, could also relate to Shanks's backstory as well. And speaking of Garling, he's actually riding one of the Alabastian ducks, so it makes me wonder if at one point the world government took some of those ducks forcefully from the Nefertari family, given their past insubordination.
Something else that's really important to mention here is that if we look at Xebec's and Roger's crew, or what eventually became Roger's crew, we notice that these crews, including their captain, have a total of 4 COC users in them. The clash that we see where Roger and Xebec are yelling at each other is very obviously a Conqueror's hockey clash. That's how Oda draws those kind of clashes. So to me, this chapter confirms that Xebec was a COC user. And he would kind of have to be, given how many Conqueror's hockey users he had in his crew. Plus, it took Roger and Garp teaming up to bring him down. And we know that Garp is also a Conqueror's hockey user as well. So if we count the confirmed Conqueror's hockey users on the Roger side and on the Xebec side, it's equal, right? It's an equal number of 4 users on each side. So for Xebec, it's Xebec himself, Kaido, Big Mom, and Whitebeard. And then for Roger, it's Roger, Rayleigh, Shanks, and Odin. And so from a narrative standpoint, it's pretty obvious that Oda's telling the story of how Luffy is going to surpass the previous pirates, right? So if he's going to surpass Xebec and Roger's crew in terms of Conqueror's hockey users, then that means that there has to be a total of 5 Straw Hats that can use King's hockey by the end of the story. And right now we only have Luffy and Zoro as confirmed users. Well, Yamato, if you include Yamato in that. But even if you do count Yamato, that's still 3 members, which means you have 2 extra slots. Now, there might be some surprises, but if I had to put money on it right now, I'd say that Jinbei and Usopp are going to be the ones to be revealed to have it. Okay, so now we can talk about the major reveal. In the beginning of the chapter, Garp says that something was stolen from Hashinosu. And in one translation, he calls it the crown jewel. The official translation says that it was the treasure of Pirate Island. The way the dialogue goes is that Garp tells Kong, "Oh, this is about the Celestial Dragon's little field trip. I warned you not to mess with Fulaled." So the Celestial Dragons, the world government, stole something from Hashinosu. And then Garp says, that was the treasure from Pirate Island. Of course they'll come to get it back. And then Kong says, who leaked that information? And then of course later we find out that it's very likely that the person who leaked that information was Ginny. So this lets us know that the main reason for why the Rocks Pirates and why the Roger Pirates are going to God Valley in the first place is to get back the treasure that was stolen from Hashinosu. And so it can't just be about them going there to get the double fruits. And I don't even think that it's about getting a poneglyph, because if you look at the chronology of the story, Roger starts taking his quest for the road poneglyphs more seriously a little bit later. Plus, if it's actually a poneglyph, then it makes no sense for Big Mom to make getting Kaido's devil fruit her top priority. So if the pirates were just there for the devil fruits, then those kids would have gotten swarmed. Like, they would have gotten rushed by all these pirates. And if it was the Red Road poneglyph that they were after, which eventually falls into the hands of Big Mom, because that's really the only road poneglyph that could be up for grabs at this point in the story, because we know where the other 3 are, right? One of them is in Zou, another one is in Wano, and the other one is in Fishman Island. Well, it was in Fishman Island, right? We know it's not there anymore, but that's where it used to be. So if it's just a road poneglyph that the pirates are showing up to get, it makes no sense, because again, Roger becomes interested in the road poneglyphs, or, he starts kind of his quest to get them later. Also, if that's the case, why is Big Mom so gung-ho about finding Kaido's devil fruit, right? Like, she's going for the devil fruit. And then look at what Whitebeard says when they're jumping off the ship. Whitebeard says, I just know that Rocks will lose sight of the goal. We have to be certain first. And so this is important because we know for a fact that Whitebeard does not care about going to Laugh Tale, right? We got the little brief flashback in Marineford where Roger asks Whitebeard, do you want to know how to get to Laugh Tale? And Whitebeard says, no, I'm not interested. I don't care about that. Therefore, it cannot be a poneglyph that they're here to get. It has to be something else. And the only thing that I can think of that would draw these top tier pirates to God Valley would be an ancient weapon. I mean, just look at the urgency of some of the words, some of the lines of the Rock's pirates. Stussy says, "Today's the final fight, I assume." And then Captain John says, "That's the idea." Gloriosa says, "We'll settle it once and for all." Like, this is like final battle type talk. Now, in Chapter 0, there is a line that has always puzzled me. It's puzzled me ever since I kind of became a One Piece fan, which was all the way back when Strong World came out, which we know, Oda was heavily involved in the production of that film. So in Chapter 0, we get a glimpse of a conflict between Shiki and Roger that's called the Ed War. And in that scene, Shiki tells Roger, "Hey, I know we've had our differences in the past, but let's join forces." And he says, "Roger, you have knowledge of the ancient weapons." Now keep in mind, this is all happening after the God Valley incident. Now there is a translation issue here because in the movie he says, "Roger, you have knowledge about, the weapons that can destroy the world." Like in plural, right? You know about the ancient weapons. But there's another translation where Shiki is saying that Roger knows about a weapon, about one of the ancient weapons that has the power to destroy the world. So whether it's all three of the ancient weapons that he knows about or whether it's just one, we need an accurate translation of the Japanese from Chapter 0 to be able to, come to terms with that. But I happen to think that it's Uranus that Roger knew about. And here's why. During the Odin flashback, we see that Roger and his crew go to Water 7. And we see Tom there. And we know that Tom at that point, has the blueprints for Pluton. And Roger doesn't mention anything about that, right? Almost like he didn't know he had them. So he doesn't say anything about that. Then, at one point, they also go to Wano, because they need a copy of the road poneglyph there. Odin gets it, and they leave. And again, it's so strange that if Roger knew about Pluton, if he knew about the location of Pluton being in Wano, then he would bring it up. But no, he doesn't say anything about that. Now, when the Roger pirates are visiting Fishman Island, Roger says this. He says, "What about the weapon that can control Neptunians? Is that here?" And then he says, "The stone on Sky Island said that it would be here." So the only reason Roger knows and then asks Shirley to predict when Shida Hoshi will be born is because he knows what the poneglyph in Skypiea said about Neptune being in Fishman Island, which means that he did not know about Neptune's location until Odin joined him, which was after the Ed War, which was after God's Valley. And then if we go back to this chapter, when we see the pirates jumping off the ship, Roger says, "It's been a whole year. Do you have any idea how I've felt all this time?" The God Valley incident happened 38 years ago. And the year before that, 39 years ago, is when the Roger pirates first get to Lodestar. We know that Roger had the power to hear the voice of all things, and that he could sort of interpret and sort of sense the voices/energy coming from the poneglyphs, and that would help him in his journey. He couldn't read it exactly, that was, work that Odin was able to do, but he could sense, stuff from the poneglyphs. So we know that the poneglyph in Skypiea tells you where to find Poseidon. We also know that the poneglyph in Alabasta tells you where to find Pluton. Is it possible that maybe there was a poneglyph in Lodestar and that the poneglyph in Lodestar tells you where to find Uranus? And so what if the poneglyph said that the key to be able to revive Uranus is in Pirate Island, is in Hashinosu? And then Roger and his crew were like, well, let's just go to Pirate Island and get the crown jewel. Oh wait, somebody already stole it, and now it's in God's Valley. Meanwhile, Rox is super upset. He's like, I need to get this back as soon as possible because it was stolen from our territory. And then both Roger and Rox hear a transmission from Ginny saying, oh, hey, by the way, there's this event in God's Valley that the Celestial Dragons are hosting, and there's some pretty rare devil fruits here, as well as the crown jewel that was stolen from Hashinosu. Okay, bye. So I think Uranus is what drew all these pirates here. Now, in terms of what the actual treasure looked like, it could be the egg that we've seen aboard the Oro Jackson in numerous occasions. In fact, the egg actually shows up during the Ed War against Shiki, which again, that's after God Valley. We don't know what actually happened to the egg after Roger disbands the crew. So my theory is that the egg is a key component of Uranus. I don't know if it's all of Uranus, but it's a key component to revive Uranus. And I think that the egg was taken to Elbaf for safekeeping. And the reason I say this is because Big Mom tells Luffy in Whole Cake Island that if the marriage between Loki and Lola had gone through, she would have the power to best the Yonko, to defeat the Yonko, and already be king of the pirates. So I think that that's what she was aiming for. And also, Lola and Chiffon were actually born 12 years after the God Valley incident. So it's possible that maybe Big Mom learned the truth about what Rox and Roger were going to God's Valley for during those years, and that she kind of shifted her focus, in that direction. Also, at one point we saw that Shanks called some of the giants old friends. So maybe Shanks, aboard the Yodel Jackson, maybe took the egg along with maybe Scopper or some of the other Roger pirates to Elbaf. Maybe they made a deal for them to protect the egg. Finally, when Big Mom and Kaido decided to make their alliance, they said that if they kept fighting each other, they wouldn't be able to accomplish their goals, but if they work together, they can get the One Piece a lot faster. And then Kaido talks about the importance of the ancient weapons, so it's possible that they were planning on exchanging information with each other, given that Kaido knew about Pluton's location and that Big Mom knew where to find Uranus. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and for all your subscriptions and likes. Really appreciate all of your support. Take care. Hope you enjoyed some of the points that I brought up. Hope you have a great week. Catch you guys later. Bye.